on it and sent it to them, and I didn't hear anything. I didn't hear anything. Months and months went by, and finally I pressed the editor person that had approached me, and I said, "What's going on?" And she sent me an email from the director of the press, and he had just trashed the book. He had uh, trashed the content, the style, the way I wrote, everything about it. He disagreed with, and so I thought, who would want to do this? Who would want to publish a book and expose themselves to this sort of thing? And then this editor from the press said, well, why don't you send it to Steve Simpkin and see if he'll take it? And he took it, and he really didn't edit a word. And so, and published it. And so long and short, I had pretty low expectations for the book. And so I was really happy to see the Ames Library push it for this Library of Congress program. And so I asked Megan tonight, I asked Megan what she thought would work best tonight, whether I would just speak contemporaneously or do a slide program. And she kind of encouraged me to do the slide program. So that's what we'll do. I live in Iowa City, but I'm up here in the Driftless area, northeast Iowa, southwest Wisconsin quite a bit. And that's this picture here. There's my Substack. And you can see it there, riverraccoon.substack.com, and the book. And so just jumping right into it, I think everybody knows this is what Iowa used to look like, right? Before European settlement. We had wetlands, we had the oak savanna, and we had the tall grass prairie. And of course, that stuff's all gone. Most of it's crops now. And so the brown here, we see crop area in Iowa. About 70% of our land is in crops. Dark green is forest. We still have a little bit of forest in northeast Iowa and in the river bottoms, and then some light green pasture. And we have a very high percentage of our land in crops, but also somewhat unusual here is so much of our land is privately held. And so more than 97% of our land is in private hands. And so if we're going to improve the environmental condition here in Iowa, naturally, we're going to have to be able to do things on private land. Prior to settlement, our streams looked like this. We had these wide, shallow systems. We know the prairie streams were clear. We had the clean water species of smallmouth bass and pumpkin seed sunfish and the generalist species of channel catfish. Our streams had sand and gravel substrate. And again, they were wide and shallow and spilled out into the floodplain with some regularity. We had perennial vegetation on the stream banks. And another thing to remember here is the water table was very close to the surface of the earth. Then we got here about the same time that John Deere invented the steel plow. And so we got here, we started breaking the prairie. But the other thing we did is we drained Iowa, especially this part of the state on north. And so you can see the guys there in the upper left, that's in Boone County, just to the west of here, putting in the old clay tiles. And those were put in about 4 feet down. Gaps were left between the tile sections to allow water to get in. And then the water discharged into these trapezoidal ditches that we built with the steam shovels. There you can see in the lower left. And so now the upper right, that's how our farming systems look, right? And so we've lowered the water table 4 feet to optimize conditions for corn and soybean production. And so now this is how a lot of our rivers start. And so this is the start of the Iowa River. And so we might imagine prior to settlement, a wetland sort of gently overflowing into a stream channel. Now we have all these tile mains dumping into a common point. And so this is the beginning of the Iowa River here in north central Iowa. And one thing to remember here is that statewide, this drop from these tile mains to the stream channel at the very top of these watersheds is about 3 feet. And so we've put 3 feet of head on all our water all across the state. And so we've energized our water, right? And so this slide, these images are from Billy Beck, who's a faculty here at Iowa State. The other thing we did is we straightened our streams. And so this is Walnut Creek in Jasper County. The green line there is the stream channel in 1930. The red line is a stream channel now. And so we cut that stream stretch in half. The distance, we cut the distance in half from 1,000 meters to 500 meters. But the vertical drop from point A to point B is the same. So we've cut that distance in half, but the drop is the same. So that means that water has more energy, right? And so it erodes downward. And so when we straighten these streams, we oftentimes use the spoils to build levees along the streams to prevent the water from flooding out onto the fields. And so these streams erode downward now. And so a lot of our streams in Iowa now are in this stage 4 of degradation in that cartoon on the right. Again, these are Billy's slides, and this is Walnut Creek. And these two pictures are taken from the same spot. You can see that hill slope in the background there. And this is no kidding. That stream can go from the top picture to the bottom picture and back to the top picture in 24 hours. Okay. And so these streams are so flashy, you know, they go down and up so fast, and none of our native species evolved to live in that hydrological condition. You also look at that cut bank there, several feet of that material was probably deposited since settlement. And so that's what we call unconsolidated. It hasn't had time to settle and solidify up. And so it's really vulnerable to erosion. And so when that stream comes up, it can access that vulnerable material very easily. And you can see how the stream banks are sloughing there. And so as a consequence, our streams are, you know, almost always muddy, right? And so, as I said, we've straightened our streams, and we've straightened thousands of miles of streams here in Iowa, especially in western Iowa. And so this is the Boyer River. The Boyer River is about 200 miles long. The entire length of it has been straightened all the way up except the last couple miles at the headwaters. And so here's what happens with these straightened streams. You can see how the eroded stream bank is progressing there, and you can see the old stream meander, and these things are ruined, right? There's no bringing them back. These streams like the Boyer and the Soldier River, the hydrologic condition has been so altered that there's really no repairing them. At the same time we were doing that, we also straightened the Missouri for navigation. And so this is Mills County here. On the left, 1923, the middle, 1947, and the right, 1976. You can see how we smoothed it out for barge traffic. We got rid of these braided channels, okay? And so this also caused the Missouri to erode downward. These are also the Missouri. They're 1934 in the upper left, 1935. You can see we're building the wing dams to keep the river in the channel. In 1977, we're farming the floodplain. And so when the Missouri eroded downward, what it did is it destabilized these outlets of the tributaries that are flowing to it in western Iowa. And so we can see here Cass County here and what happens to these streams. And so as the Missouri erodes downward, then the outlet to the tributary also has to erode downward, and that erosion migrates upstream, okay? You get a head cut, it migrates upstream. We also put the dams on the Missouri. Here's at Fort Peck, and we can see what we did with the dams here. And so this altered sediment transport in the Missouri system. And so we see this map here. The yellow is sediment transport in 1800, and the brown is sediment transport in 1980. And so we cut off a lot of this sediment from the Missouri River Basin, okay? Here's another graph showing the same thing and how we've reduced the sediment loading in the Missouri. So the Missouri was a muddy water system that we converted to a clear water system. Well, this has had really dire ecological consequences down in the Gulf of Mexico. And so this is the outlet of the Mississippi. We know the wetlands are eroding down there. And so there's multiple drivers here. We've cut off the sediment from the Missouri. We've got subsidence, so a sinking of the coastline because of oil and gas extraction. And then we have climate change that's raising sea level. And so we see how all of these things are combining here to erode the wetlands down at the Gulf. And so converting the Missouri to a clear water system has also endangered some species that evolved to live in this muddy water condition. The pallid sturgeon is one. And then we have these birds that use the floodplain habitat that are also endangered. And so now here's our streams, right? Now our streams are down in these canyons. And if you didn't know any better and you drive across the countryside and you drive across a bridge and you see this streamway down there, you might think that's the way it should look. No, that's not the way they should look, right? And so we have here in Iowa what we call landscape bias, where we don't even know what our streams should look like. No one alive knows what these streams should or could look like. And so we have the pollution tolerant species of the carp and bullhead. We still have the generalist species of channel catfish. A lot of the sands and gravels of the substrate have been silted in. The streams are way down there. The water table is much deeper now. And we have the tile drainage coming in. We've replaced the perennial plants on the stream bank with annual plants of corn and soybean. And again, we've straightened these long stretches of streams, in the South Skunk as one of them. While we were transforming the hydrology here, we also were transforming our farms. And so this is a very famous graphic from the DNR pheasant study that was conducted in the 70s. This map here is a farm in Winnebago County in north central Iowa, and we can see a diversity of land uses on this farm. So corn, yes, a lot of corn, some soybeans, yes, but a lot of pasture, wood lots, marshy areas, and houses, okay? Oats, we have a lot of oats in 1941. Then we fast forward to 1976, and we've condensed this all down to two crops mainly, corn and soybeans. We still have some oats in 1976, and of course, those would be gone in the present day. And so we know that nature wants diversity, right? Nature likes diversity. And to get the environmental outcomes that we want, we need diversity on the landscape. But we've done the opposite here. We've condensed everything down to two species. And so now our farming systems look like this. And if you were to drive around the countryside and look at our farms, you would say, wow, these look clean, right? They all look clean. We've got our clean rows of GMO corn and soy. We've got the hog industry. We've got 25 million hogs here in Iowa. We could drive across the state and never see a hog, right? Because they're all in these buildings up on the horizon. And then we've got the ethanol industry. And so this all looks so clean to us, but of course we know that this has had environmental consequences. The two that are most apparent to us are the soil erosion and the nutrient pollution. And so I always talk about how this is a problem of scale. This is something, our leaders in politics and in agriculture don't want to talk about, is we just have this problem of scale here. And so if every farmer is doing everything perfectly, we're still going to have probably intolerable pollution. And so what is the scale of production here? Well, we have 70% of our land in annual crops. That is an enormous number for an area the size of the state of Iowa. We have 11,000 square miles of our state that are just used for to grow corn for ethanol. So we have 99 counties. Think of 20 of them are being used to grow corn for ethanol. We have 25 million hogs, 4 million beef cattle, 80 million laying chickens. That's probably more like 60 million now. 5 million turkeys, 4 million broilers, and a sizable dairy with 250,000 dairy cows. So can we get the environmental outcomes that we want when we're producing at this scale? I would say no, but this is something we just cannot bring ourselves to talk about. We'd like to hear from, or we hear from the industry quite often that how much they've improved on soil erosion, but soil erosion is still very high. You can see the parts of the state where it's worst, areas draining to the Missouri and then northeast Iowa. We're still the worst state in the United States for soil erosion. You can see us there, Minnesota second, and so forth. And we've also contaminated our drinking water. And so we have about 6 to 7,000 private wells in Iowa that have been contaminated with unsafe levels of nitrate since the year 2000. We have thousands more that are have E. coli in them. About 25% of the people in Iowa are drinking municipal water that's been treated for nitrate removal. And about 60 of our public water supplies are either treating for it or blending it down. And we've all heard of the situation in Des Moines. Des Moines put in the nitrate removal in 1992, 32 years ago. Okay, we still have not solved this, 32 years. And I would say, well, let me say first, the nitrate standard of 10 parts per million as nitrogen was part of the first Safe Drinking Water Act in 1974, and that limit was intended to be protective of infants, okay? Infants drinking high nitrate water, vulnerable to blue baby syndrome, and so the 10 part per million standard was intended to be protective of infants. But we've known for a long time that adults drinking water with nitrate less than 10 parts per million have increased vulnerabilities to certain health outcomes. And so this paper, 23 years ago now, 23 years, we've known this, association of cancer, especially bladder cancer in older women and high nitrate water. We have this paper here, nitrate from drinking water and diet and bladder cancer amongst postmenopausal women in Iowa, 8 years old. This one, positive associations between drinking water nitrate and thyroid cancer. This one here, 14 years old now, almost 15 years old. Well, 5 parts per million, how many people in Iowa are drinking 5 part per million water? Almost 1 million people, okay? 1 million people drinking water with that much nitrate. Here's a paper, 10 years old, consuming water with nitrate greater than 3 part per million for 11 years, doubled the risk of ovarian cancer in Iowa women. This paper, 11 years ago, birth defects, mothers consuming water with more than 5 part per million have this double risk of birth defects that you can see there. This one here, 8 years old now, living within 1 mile of a CAFO, doubles your risk of an antibiotic-resistant staph infection. Asthma, we've known this for 20 years now. 20 years, kids that go to schools near CAFOs have double the risk of asthma in Iowa. This is Wisconsin, high nitrate water and cancer, and I'll just let you quickly read that. Increased incidence of cancer due to high nitrate in Wisconsin water. And this paper here shows nationwide about 14% of all the people in the United States drinking high nitrate water live in Iowa. So we have less than 1% of the population. We have about 14% of the population of the country drinking high nitrate water. And so then, you know, all this has just sort of passed by without the public noticing over the last quarter century. And then this article comes out about a year ago now, I think, and showing that Iowa has the second highest cancer rate in the United States. We're the only state that has an increasing rate of cancer. And so this did get some attention in the media and amongst the public. And, you know, over at the University of Iowa, you may or may not know, we have our own drinking water treatment plant. And so it's right there on the Iowa River. It uses Iowa River water. It supplies water to campus and the hospital. And a few years ago, the university had to invest in reverse osmosis because of high nitrate in the Iowa River. Okay. But also at the university, if you watch our football games, right, at the end of the first quarter, we have this ritual where everybody turns and waves at the kids in the hospital. And do we ever think why some of those kids might be in there, right? We don't, right? We don't think about that. So here we go. And so our football coach does radio advertisements for the corn growers and Farm Bureau and so forth. Of course, we have the A&F game, which we just had a few weeks ago. And these are the drinking fountains at Kinnick Stadium, okay? And so we have the corn growers sponsoring the drinking fountains at Kinnick Stadium. At the same time, the university is buying reverse osmosis treatment to treat the water from the university drinking water plant. And I would just submit to you, this is a problem, the way the industry has intruded into our institutions. This is a big obstacle to solving these things, in that the industry has gotten control of our institutions, and this is a very unhealthy thing for the state. So it's not just drinking water. We know our surface waters are impacted. We have the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. The high nitrate water and phosphorus gets into the Mississippi River stream network, feeds algae blooms in the Gulf of Mexico. When they die, they consume oxygen, make conditions unsuitable for shrimp and fish and so forth. We have a similar situation in Lake Erie that's mainly driven by phosphorus. And so what are our contributions to the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico? Well, when we look at the Missouri River Basin, it's huge, right? Goes all the way to the Continental Divide, Yellowstone Park. Iowa areas draining to the Missouri comprise 3.3% of the Missouri River Basin. So at 3.3% of the land, we contribute 55% of the nitrate to the Missouri River. Blue area of Iowa draining to the upper Mississippi, we have 21% of the land. We contribute 45% of the nitrate. And then down at the Gulf, at the outlet, we have 4.5% of the land. We contribute 29% of the nitrate and 15% of the phosphorus. And so the point here I want to make is we are polluting at the continental scale, okay? We are polluting at the continental scale. And so if we're going to solve this, we have to do something here in Iowa. We have to do something different. You know, we're killing off part of an ocean. What more of a sign do we need that what we're doing maybe isn't very sustainable? And so I want to point out here that some of our streams can have some integrity and still have high nutrient concentrations. And so one of them is the Wapsipinicon River in eastern Iowa. And so when you look at the Wapsi, what do you see? Well, you see a stream bank there that still has integrity, right? The riparian area still has integrity. The Wapsi has a high nitrate level, and I presume a high phosphorus too, but still it has some integrity. It's got desirable species, smallmouth bass and northern pike. And it's because we're able to protect this riparian area, but we see so many of our streams here in Iowa where we're farming right up to the stream bank, right? There's no integrity to the riparian area. And I would just tell you that if we cannot protect the riparian areas here of our streams, there is no hope, right? That's basic conservation 101, is to protect the stream banks. But yet we can't even do that. We can't even do what we can do, right? And so how on earth are we going to solve these vast statewide and continental-wide nutrient problems when we can't even buffer our streams? And so what is the economics of fixing this nitrate? Well, to go buy a pound of nitrate costs a farmer about 50 cents now. According to the nutrient strategy, the suite of practices that we're recommending cost between $2 and $10 a pound to keep that nitrate out of the stream. So 50 cents to buy it, an average of $6 to keep it out of the stream. Our average statewide stream nitrogen load is about 600 million pounds per year. We have an objective of a 45% reduction. So 45% would be 270 million pounds less. And so that would cost us between $540 and $2.7 billion per year. We are never going to have that money. We are never going to have that amount of money to fix this. This is a fantasy to think we're going to fix this farmer by farmer, BMP by BMP. It's just dumb for us to think in that context. We need to transform the system to something else if we're going to solve this nutrient pollution. And so Matt Liebman, who's here tonight, I've been using his work for a long time here, so I hope this is still right. Did a lot of his research at the Marsden farm, looking at extended rotation of corn, soy, oats, and 2 years of alfalfa versus corn and soybean. Nitrogen fertilizer use 91% lower in the extended rotation. Herbicide use 97% lower. Even with almost completely eliminating the herbicides, the weed biomass was similar. Soybean health was better. Soil health was better. Tile nitrate, 57% lower. So remember, our objective for the nutrient strategy is a 45% reduction. Here we have a 57% reduction, and this costs the taxpayer nothing, $0, right? Cut soil erosion in half, fossil fuel use more than half, but net returns to the farmer were similar. The revenue was lower, but the input costs were also lower. So why don't we do this, right? Why don't we do this? Well, we don't have the infrastructure, right, set up to really accommodate all this oat and alfalfa production, but why couldn't we get that? We created this behemoth of an ethanol industry through policy. It seems to me we ought to be able to create the built and economic infrastructure, to accommodate these other crops if we wanted to, but we don't want to. And so one thing I talk about a lot these days is ethanol. And so when we look at the price of farmland in Iowa versus the amount of ethanol produced in the United States, they track in lockstep, right? We see that. They track in lockstep. And so we hear all the time how we've got a lot of young people in Iowa that want to farm, but they can't break in because they can't get the land. Why can't they get the land? Because it's so expensive. Why is it so expensive? It's because we've created this guaranteed market for corn, right? It's almost impossible to lose money growing corn here in Iowa. So yes, the capital, the value of the capital is going to increase. So think about this. The amount of corn calories we use in this country to produce fuel ethanol exceeds the caloric requirements of every person in the United States. That's how much we're committing to using fuel ethanol in our cars. Ethanol also creates perversity in U.S. agriculture. We know in these areas to the west of us, Nebraska, Kansas, we have ethanol plants out there, right? In western Kansas, western Nebraska. Well, we're irrigating corn with the Ogallala Aquifer to produce ethanol in these arid areas. How does that make sense, right? It takes 6,000 years to naturally replenish the Ogallala Aquifer. Why are we doing this? We've all heard the Colorado River's drying up, right? Los Angeles, Phoenix, Las Vegas are going to run out of water. half of the Colorado River is used to irrigate alfalfa. Half of it. And so a lot of that alfalfa goes to China and to Saudi Arabia and other countries. And so this is a crop we could grow here without irrigation. And so why are we doing this? It does not make sense. It's perverse. The industry would like us to hang our hat on the idea that ethanol reduces greenhouse gas emissions, but this paper from some researchers at Wisconsin and Minnesota show increased greenhouse gas emissions 24% of ethanol versus unblended gasoline. So clearly, we're just producing ethanol here for commerce, right? Right now, it's just for commerce. It's not, we're not getting environmental outcomes, desirable environmental outcomes from the production of this fuel ethanol. Well, as I said, we have 11,000 square miles that we use to grow corn for ethanol. What else could we do on these 11,000 square miles? Now, I know we don't have the labor or the built or economic infrastructure, but this is just to put it in some context. So we have 11,000 square miles, 7 million acres committed to ethanol production. What else could we do? It would take 1.1 million of them, grow all the dried beans for everybody in the United States. We could grow all the potatoes, all the apples, all the sweet corn, all the onions, all the cherries, all the walnuts, still have 5 million of those 7 million acres left. So clearly, I think we should start to imagine what else we can do with all these acres that are being used to grow corn for ethanol. So the point I'm trying to make wherever I go is until the industry is ready to transition to a more sustainable system, a more diverse system, and one that will give us better environmental outcomes, then we ought to have a say in how the present system is operated. We indemnify it through publicly supported crop insurance. We're asked to mitigate the pollution from it. If that's going to be the case going forward, we ought to have a say as taxpayers on how the system is operated. And so I have my 5 things here. I know it's not going to solve the problem here, but again, these are things we can do. We can do and not upset the apple cart in terms of the corn soy system. So first one there, ban cropping in the 2-year floodplain and buffer our streams. Conservation 101. We have about 500,000 acres in Iowa in the 2-year floodplain that are cropped. So every other year, all the inputs on those acres gone to the Gulf of Mexico. Why are we doing this? It's perverse. There are not people, there are not starving people that are being, saved by farming in the floodplain here. Ban fall tillage. And so Iowa State's been putting out guidance on this since the 80s. It all says one thing, it's bad. We can drive from here to Minnesota in a couple weeks and we'll see tilled fields. I came up from I-80. There's fields with no tilled fields between here and Ankeny, tilled fields that have no residue, none, zero, completely tilled. Well, the wind blew 30 miles an hour today, right? How many days between now and April 15th is the wind going to blow like that? Probably quite a few. Ban manure on snow and frozen ground. We do have some rules, but they're riddled with loopholes. This is a terrible practice. Everybody knows it's terrible. Every farmer that does this knows those nutrients are going to be gone. Why do we allow this? Make farmers adhere to the ISU fertilization guidelines. If you read my Substack a couple weeks ago, I posted something. And so I looked at the fertilizer distribution data from IDOLS, looked at the total amount of nitrogen being applied, commercial nitrogen, and it's about 30 pounds per acre more than what the ISU recs are through the N-rate calculator. So the commercial nitrogen, 30 pounds per acre more on a statewide average than what the crop needs. And that doesn't even consider manure. Okay, haven't even considered manure yet. And so we're over applying at 30 pounds per acre just with the commercial, and we still have all this manure from 25 million hogs and whatever else that we haven't even accounted for. How do we give farmers license to do whatever they want with their inputs and then ask the taxpayer to mitigate the pollution at the field's edge with these things like constructed wetlands and bioreactors and whatever? It does not make sense. We need to reformulate our CAFO regulations. We need to give the counties authority to zone for CAFOs. The manure management plans in our present laws endorse an over-application of nutrient. That whole thing needs to be rewritten. These things will not solve all our problems, but again, I think they're reasonable and it's things we should be able to expect, okay, from an industry that controls so much of our state. The other thing is we need more public land. I think it's a disgrace here how little public land we have. This graph or picture shows what we have compared to the surrounding states. I just think it's a disgrace that the citizens of Iowa are deprived of the right to enjoy nature the way other people are in other states. We need more public land. This is a chapter in my book. I wrote this at the time. I kind of thought this was my manifesto. And, you know, this stop saying clean water, stop saying we all want clean water. If you go to meetings on this, you hear this all the time. Well, we all want clean water. Well, it's just this trite thing that people, you know, we all want it in the abstract, right? But we don't really want to do what's necessary to get it. And so none of us want to drink poisonous water, surely. But how many of our leaders really want to do what's necessary to give us clean water? And, you know, I'm just calling BS on this. I mean, I tell people all the time, nobody needs to believe me, right, about our water. All you have to do is go out and look at these streams, look at them and smell them. All right. Do they look the way you think they should look? Do they smell the way you think they should smell? Are the species there that you think should be there? Soldier River. It's hard for me to say that we all want clean water when we got rivers looking like this, right? Here's the Iowa River, south of Iowa City. That's my boat there. Des Moines River here, southeast of Des Moines. The Nishnabotna. We've all heard about the problems of the Nishnabotna, where we had the big fertilizer release that killed the stream all the way down into Missouri. It's kind of the poster child for farming right up to the stream bank. Here's a Raccoon River, soybeans falling in falling down the bank. Here's somebody just sent me this one today, the Turkey River in northeast Iowa. You know, I got to say, it takes some moxie to run equipment along that thing, right? I wouldn't have it, but still, it's a disgrace. How do we let our rivers get treated in this way? Why do we tolerate this as citizens? You know, I just think we've all grown up with, we've lived here our whole life. We've all grown up with this and we don't know any better. And I just think if this is ever going to change, we are going to have to demand change as citizens. To think we can go into the voting booth and check the correct box and we're going to get the outcomes that we want, I think, no, that's not going to happen. We're going to have to demand change as citizens. This is going to have to be grassroots action. There's a raccoon again. We see this all over Iowa, right? The cattle having access to the stream. We will pay farmers. We will pay farmers not to do this. There's money available from NRCS to help farmers drill a well and create rotational grazing systems and fencing and all these other things so the cattle don't have to get in the stream. We'll pay them to do it. They still don't want to do it. Here's another one, Spring Creek. This goes into Red Rock. And our lakes, our lakes in the summer are almost unusable for a couple months. This past summer, we had more beach postings than we've ever had going back to 2014. Here's Lake McBride. Here's Spirit Lake in northwest Iowa. And so we get this real highly nutrified condition in our lakes, and nature does some crazy stuff, right? Lake Minnewaska, North Twin Lake, Lake Keoma, Lake Darling. And so Lake Darling south of Iowa City. Lake Darling's an interesting one because we've restored Lake Darling a couple times. The last time, I believe, was in 2013, a cost of $16 million. If you look at Lake Darling, we have all sorts of fields identified around Lake Darling that are claimed in manure management plans. And down there, there's 19 fields, I think, within a half a mile of the lake that are claimed by 35 manure management plans. So 19 fields claimed by 35 manure management plans. I asked the guy at the field office at DNR, well, how do you keep track of this? And he says, we don't keep track of it. We just let the farmers work it out. Well, come on, how are we ever going to get clean water in Lake Darling, right? And here it was restored in 2013, and this picture was taken last fall. Here it is, all green again. Again, why do we tolerate this? I just don't know. And so I like this picture because I think this gives a clear picture of what Iowa agriculture really is. Right? It's not that clean system. We got the ethanol plant up there in the background. We have the discharge from the ethanol plant into this stream here. We have the bare fields in the wintertime. This is Iowa. It's bleak. It's bleak, right? And so ultimately, what do we want this production system to look like? Do we want a system that's designed for commerce? Or do we want a system that's designed for human nutrition and environmental outcomes? Now, I know we're not going to grow all this stuff here, right? I mean, for the foreseeable future, we're going to have commodity crops and, CAFO meat. I get that. But what we could do could be so much better than what we're doing now. It could be so much better with relatively little effort. But the industry won't change because we won't demand that they change. So I'll finish up with this slide. This is in my book, and I did this many years ago. I never could imagine this would be maybe the most consequential thing I would ever do, but these are the Huck 8 watersheds in Iowa. There's 56 of them. Huck is hydrologic unit code. It's the way we classify watersheds. A Huck 8 watershed in Iowa is about 1,000 square miles on average. I looked at the animal populations in each watershed. I looked at literature values for how much nutrient and solids they were excreting in their waste. I converted that to a human equivalent. And then I put the human equivalent population that was in all our watersheds. And so, in terms of fecal waste, we have the equivalent here of 168 million people. And you look upstream of Des Moines, we have Chicago, Paris, Tokyo, Alabama, Oklahoma, and Rome. And so is it any mystery why Des Moines struggles with providing clean drinking water to the citizens? No, it's not a mystery. And so can we get the environmental outcomes that we want when we're producing at this scale? And I would suggest to you that we cannot. But again, this is nothing we can get political and industry leaders to talk about. So that's it, and I'm happy to discuss whatever you guys would want to discuss and answer some questions. And I think we got a few minutes here.
Absolutely. If you have questions, I've got a microphone I'll come around with.
Just to say, thank you for doing what you're doing. I think you're like, kind of like the next Bill Stowe. I also work in a wastewater factory, so the municipality side of what is going on here and all the hoops we have to jump to. How many of you are residents' names? Right now, you are getting built a nutrient reduction side on your wastewater plant, and you are paying for that. Nothing is happening when what this man is saying, that they're dumping all this anhydrous ammonia with no, what would you say, like justification that they can just keep dumping all this fertilizer just to produce plants. But yet you as a taxpayer are building something that is supposed to take that ammonia and the nitrogen out. Just think about that for a little bit. I mean, I don't think that sounds fair, does it? I've also, before I got into the water industry, I just was also a duck hunter. So when you talk about public land usage, Iowa is probably the worst in public land, especially when it comes down to waterfowl. You have no wetlands. What, I think 2%, 5% is original. And I think
less than 1%.
yes, and I think we are actually like native prairie that has not been touched by man, that is restored, is less than 1% also. So take that also. That's why we have such rich soil. Was this place looked like South Dakota as it does now, and we are completely lost of that. So and it kind of strikes a nerve with me when I see people that I'm not taking anything away from farmers' work ethic by any means, but at a certain point you want to say, when's enough's enough? I mean, you got leaders that are in Des Moines that are wanting, if they had it that way, this whole state would be a cornfield. And that's not far-fetched. I mean, if you're literally in Minnesota, I think they're putting how many buffers? It's law that you have to put a buffer. If a dredge ditch is running through a cornfield, it has to be buffered. Now, they don't want to be governed because they don't think that they are doing anything malicious. But everything, I guess, has consequences. This isn't, it's kind of a rant, sorry, but, and I do like, I drove from a couple counties away when I heard that you're coming here, so I'm kind of actually glad I came. So, but I just want to say thank you for speaking out, because this is a hard topic. You say this and you are going to be blacklisted. It's seriously, I mean, if you, and what's funny is you actually come to how many agronomists graduate from this college, and you are in one of the more like agricultural colleges, which I think takes a lot of gall. So, but I appreciate it.
Oh, all right, thank you for that. Thanks for the rant.
Has anybody ever approached you with the Farm Bill regarding any of these guidelines?
No, I mean, people ask me questions about the Farm Bill all the time, and there are people in the legislature that talk to me. From time to time, I would say there's not many people in the legislature that like me very much, and that includes Democrats as well as Republicans. And so, you know, we did see on my 5 things, there was a bill in the legislature introduced last year to buffer our streams at 30 feet. So we got that far. We got one bill introduced.
Introduced.
Yeah.
Okay. So does the Secretary of Agriculture, Vilsack, have you ever asked for a meeting with him?
I think you overestimate my my influence, and so, you know, Tom Vilsack So I know Matt Russell, who's the FSA director in Iowa. And I know him pretty well, and he's a presidential appointee. He's got one of the top 2 jobs, USDA jobs in Iowa. And so I talked to him some. He doesn't really, I mean, he'll listen to what you say in terms of Vilsack and the Farm Bill and so forth, but, he's not going to really say anything provocative. I will tell you this, and I've said this before, and so I don't feel bad about saying it again. Tom Vilsack as Agriculture Secretary this time around has been demoralizing to me. Really has. I think he has set us back a long, long time. And so if Harris wins, I sure hope that she does not pick him again, but who knows?
Yeah, I want to come back to the buffer question again, because we know that Minnesota has a law, as has been stated here, about a 50-foot buffer. But it seems to be that one size fits all is not a good standard. That ought to be a minimum, it seems like to me. And if you base it on soils and slope and other things, we already have lots of buffers along many of our rivers that are much wider than that, 100 yards, 200 yards or more, because they're forested. And other places, as you have shown, there are none at all. So why do we choose 50 feet? Is there any research that shows that 50 feet is enough, too much?
So, I mean, there is research on this, and I can't speak about it authoritatively. You're right that we have areas that are buffered way back, maybe a half a mile or more. My instinct on that is, though, if they could be farming that, they would be farming it. Okay. And so there's something about that 500 feet or whatever it is that's preventing them from farming. Look, I'm not hanging my hat on any number. If anybody wants to put any number out there, throw it out there. Like I said, the people in the legislature threw out 30 feet last year. If they threw out 3 inches, I would say that's a start, right? Because we have so many of our streams, especially Western Iowa. It's terrible. And, this is, a joke we had when I was working. Those streams out there, they are not coming back unless we have another ice age, right? They're not coming back. And so we really need to focus on our streams in the eastern 2/3 of the state. What can we do to protect them? We look at the Boone River, and the Boone River high nitrate still has some integrity in terms of the biology. Why? Because the riparian area still has some integrity. So I'm not hung up on any particular number. If somebody wants to suggest a better number, look, I'm fine with it. But I just think it's disgraceful that we can't even buffer our streams here.
Hello, I'm Leo, live here at Ames, but I have lived in Iowa City too. So I lived to both places, and I have farmland, but I'm in another profession, healthcare. So you said it's hard to lose money raising corn. I'll challenge you on that. I'll tell you how to be a farmer and lose money raising corn like this year. I've read your book. I'll talk to you afterwards. You're a friend of her neighbor of mine. Anyway, the recommended fertilization rates based on Iowa State, I think, are 10 years old. There's new data out, which is not published yet. And am I correct on that? In your book, you quote that we're supposed to use 30, we're using 30 pounds too much. But I think that's based on at least 10, now 14-year-old data. New data is not available, but there's research going on in that. And I know you've given lots of talks and everybody gets mad at you. By the way, Tom Vilsack's a lawyer, not a farmer, and not a researcher like you. So maybe I share some of their concerns, but on tillage, no fall tillage, well, farmers have changed a lot. John Deere 2 years ago made the last moldboard plow. We used to moldboard plow, there is no more. You can't buy a new plow. And we do different kinds of tillage, strip till and so forth. I guess I'd like a little love somewhere that maybe somebody's done something good. They're trying. Some farmers are trying. What else?
So, you know, so of course, some farmers are doing things. There's no doubt about that. I hear that all the time when I do talk to farmers. Oh, we're so much better than we were 40 years ago. And I would say, good God, I hope so.
Yeah.
You know, is GM a whole lot better than they were 40 years ago? Yeah. You know, is you name it, whatever company you want to talk. I hope they're a lot better than they were 40 years ago. As far as the moldboard plow, I mean, I'd hate to think that John Deere stopping production of the moldboard plow is some sort of milestone for us. I mean, didn't we know a long, long time ago that that was bad, right? And we're still talking. I mean,
No,
the fact that we still mention the moldboard plow in here is an indictment.
when
you
I
know,
was
it-
in school, that was good. When John Deere saved the world.
How old are you?
Probably older than you. No, I'm not arguing with
And
you. I
so
like your book.
nitrogen- Yeah, and the nitrogen, look, we could, that recommended rate could go up 50 pounds per acre. And we would still be way, way above
Oh, I agree.
what the crop inputs are. And so, you know, should it be a free-for-all? I guess that's my main point on nitrogen. Should it be a free-for-all that the industry can do whatever they want?
Who's the industry?
The
What's
industry are the farmers, in this case, in terms of nitrogen, it's the farmers and the retailers. Should they be able to do whatever they want with inputs? My opinion is no. Okay, when we have a watershed like the Raccoon that has a municipal water supply supplying probably almost 700,000 people now, we have a river that maybe has the highest nitrate of any river of that size in North America. But yet we let farmers do whatever they want with nitrogen. How do you square that in your head?
Well, nitrogen costs money, so most good farmers don't want to spend more on nitrogen
Then
than
why
they
is
need
the
to.
water polluted? Why is the water polluted? I hear this all the time that,
I
oh,
know.
there's only a small percentage of farmers that are polluting the water. Well, that can't be when all our streams in the state, you know, have this elevated nitrate.
You know, years ago, there were, what have I heard, billions of buffalo running around, wading in the streams and that. Did anybody do water quality tests then? No, I don't, I don't know.
So
Here's a
that's
few
good
cows.
point. And the bison is a good point. And so, look, what kills E. coli bacteria? Sunlight. Well, when our streams are clear and an animal defecates in the river, the sunlight's going to kill those bacteria relatively quickly. When our streams and our lakes are turbid, the sunlight can't get down there and it can't kill the bacteria. As far as them defecating on the stream bank, well, we had all this surface area across the landscape with the tall grass prairie that was intercepting particles as the water transported it towards the stream. Well, bacteria is a particle, okay? And that gets intercepted by vegetated areas in the riparian zone there. And so the bison, yes, the bison definitely contributed to things back before settlement, but you know, the effects were far different because of this altered hydrology that we have now and the fact that we don't have perennial cover on the landscape.
One thing, I'll make one more comment. I know Ames water tastes good. Iowa City water most of the time does not. And you
So
work
do you
in-
want me to answer that?
Yeah, I live there, so I fish.
So, Iowa City has shallow wells that are sucking water through the alluvium from the Iowa River, right? Ames has some deep wells here, right? There's some shallow wells, but there's some deep wells here. And so Iowa City water tastes like crap because it's got crap in the river. That's where it's coming from.
All right, I think we have time for one more question.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for all you do. And being so brave. You're a great inspiration to us academics. I just thought you'd get a chuckle out of this. When I came back from New Zealand from my sabbatical, I was speaking in the agronomy department here, and I suggested that we follow the Kiwis' example of regulating nitrogen, because every farmer in New Zealand has to prepare a nutrient plan that is checked by the local government. And if you violate that, go over the limit of nitrogen that you're allowed, which is a lot less than here, you are fined. And it works. And I was just stunned that everybody in the audience was just like, zip. You know, that's fallacy to talk about that here. So salute you. Is there any hope? That's my final question to you.
So firstly, I'd say look, in 1985, we had conservation compliance in the Farm Bill, right? So any farmer that was farming highly erodible land had to adopt a soil conservation plan if he or she wanted to participate in the federal farm programs. That worked. We know beyond a shadow of a doubt that conservation compliance caused streams in Iowa to get clearer. We know that. Research done here, research done in Iowa City showed that conservation compliance on soil conservation worked. Why can't we do conservation compliance on nutrients? Why can't we ask farmers, look, if you want to participate in the federal crop insurance program, you've got to adhere to a certain N rate based on your soil type and location and landscape and so forth. Or if you've got a very high soil test, phosphorus, you know, you can't be putting down phosphorus. Why can't we do that? We know that worked for soil erosion, and farmers accept it. Farmers completely accept conservation compliance now. Some of them, yeah, they're in violation or, you know, they get reported, but we know that worked. Is there hope? Yes, there's always hope. And one of my first events was in Fairfield. One of my first book events was in Fairfield. And a woman came up to me afterwards and she said, I love how you talk about Howard's Inn in your book. She said, I want to tell you that I went to the University of Wisconsin, and when I was there, Howard's Inn came and spoke. And she said, I got to talk to him one-on-one afterward. She said, I'll never forget what he told me. He said, everybody thinks the civil rights movement started when Rosa Parks got on the bus. No, that's not the case. It started 15 years before that, people meeting in churches and schools and other people's homes and libraries, thinking about ways to get Rosa Parks on the bus, okay? And so that's how we have to think about this here in Iowa. I say all the time, yes, this is a social justice issue. It most certainly is. Water here, polluted water, is a quality of life issue. When we look at these polls of these kids that are leaving Iowa, the Gen Y or whatever they are, water quality is big on that list. And so, you know, if we want to have a vibrant state going forward, we have got to improve the environmental condition of this state. We just have to. So thanks for coming and appreciate your attention.